The regal period of Rome from 753 to 509. During the regal period, Rome was ruled by kings. A king was advised by a group of older men in society who were wealthy and aristocratic, and the assembly of citizens would have to listen to what the king had to say, although they couldn't vote. The king wasn't descended from a line of people, but rather was picked from eligible nobles that the members of the Senate would vote for. The roles of the king included being military chief, and he held imperium to command the army. This is symbolized through the fasces, a rod that was held by those of the highest rank. During the period of the Roman Republic, consuls and praetors held the fasces. Finally, the king also held the role as priest. The Senate during the regal period was comprised of 100 men, the patres, though over time it increased to 300. The role of the Senate was to provide advice to the king, although he was able to reject this advice. They also appointed an interrex, a caretaker king, and when a king died during a time called interregnum, the interrex would appoint a new king, which the Senate and people approved. There were tensions even during the regal period between the patrician elite aristocratic class and the plebeians, the commoner class. Although don't mistake the plebeians for extremely poor people, because the plebes could be wealthy as well, could even be nobles. The only thing differentiating them from the patricians were they were just not as rich as them. There was also the patrons and clients, where one man is born to lead and others natural followers. The patrons and clients would both aid each other in Roman life. The regal period was diminished after the revolution of 509, when the monarchy was replaced by an oligarchy, and the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, was overthrown. He ruled from 534 to 509. After the revolution, there was a struggle of orders, which was a long-withstanding problem within the Republic. The patrician elite versus the plebeian commoner class created this tension, where the plebeians owed patricians debt, and the plebeians wanted a share in political opportunities. To avoid civil war between the two classes, the Republic had to modify social system. This was done in successions. The first succession was in 494, where the plebeians basically refused to go to war, so the patricians had to give them several compromises. The first compromise was the plebeian tribunes, who were basically the champions of the plebeians. The second compromise was the plebeian aedile, who were assistant to the tribunes. And the third was the Councilium Plebis, aka the plebeian council, which was organized through tribal voting. The 12 tables in 449. After the first succession, no written law code was made, so 3 commissioners were sent to Greece to study their legal law code. When they got back, a 10-man team called the Decemvirate produced a legal code for Rome. The 12 tables dealt with legal procedures, debt, family relations, property, and other matters of law. As the struggle of orders continued, after the 12 tables, the plebeians obtained minor offices such as the aedile and the quaestor, and offices became available to them in 421. The plebeian tribunes Stolo and Lucius created the Lysias section laws. This law permitted the plebeians to run for consulship, and this law was made in 367. This law also provided debt relief and limits on land for individuals. In 342, Lucius created another law where one of the 2 consuls had to be plebeian. This was called the Ganutian law. In fact, in 172, 2 plebeians became consul for the very first time. By the 4th century, the Roman constitution was structured like so. The first part of the constitution was the 4 assemblies of people, which consisted of the centuriate assembly, the comitia centuria, which voted on matters of war, the curiate assembly, which was comprised of all citizens of Rome, in one of 30 communities called curia. These 30 communities created 3 tribes, the Ramines, the Tites, and the Luceres. The third assembly was the tribal assembly, the comitia tributa, who copied the plebeian council and organized by tribes. And finally, the last assembly was the plebeian council, council plebis. The second part of the constitution was the consuls, praetors, and dictators, officials with executive power and held imperium. The praetors were assistants to the consuls, one of the three magistrates. The third part of the constitution was aedles and quaestors, who were two minor officials with administrative functions. The curial aedles, who were also magistrates, were the patrician counterbalance to the plebeian aedles. The fourth part of the constitution was the tribunes, who had plebeian background and could overrule any other official. The fifth part is the censor, who had power to choose and dismiss senators, and there were two censors in the Republic. And the sixth part is the Senate. As the struggle of orders continued, it finally came to a resolution where several laws were created throughout the course of it. The first law was mentioned before, in 367, the Lysias Section Law, where plebeians became eligible for consul. The Ganutian Law in 342, where one of two consuls had to be plebeian. The Avinian Law in 339, where membership in the Senate was for life. In 300, the Ogulnian Law, where plebeians could become pontiffs and augurs, leaving only priesthood under patrician control. And the Hortensian Law in 287, where a plebeian council no longer needed senatorial approval to pass legislation. After the Third Punic War, in 146, the Corses Honorum was created, which was an elite group where they resisted any entry of senators who weren't of consular ancestry. The Cursus Honorum could be sequenced as so: dictator, censor, consul, praetor, tribune, aedile, and quaestor.